We are live. It's going to take me a second to get this set up, but we can go ahead and start chit-chatting.
Nice.
Hello, Alice. Welcome to the hole. I'm getting things ready, but we have John Sims Jones from Resistance House Band in the building. He's got a show coming up November 4th or 5th. I'm not sure which yet. And then we got Hyatt Collins from Cassette Stress joining us once again. And we have the great and powerful Evan as well.
Hey, Alice.
Here joining us. We're going to talk about Annihilation, the first book from the Southern Reach trilogy, by someone.
Jeff Vandermeer.
This was a short book.
That was a good one.
It was short, easy to get through. I will talk about it more in a minute, but even though it was like less than 200 pages, I felt like it could have been shorter. There was some, what's a polite way of saying filler?
Is there a polite way of saying filler?
No.
Extraneous information?
Yeah. I understand that they're setting up stuff to happen, but there's a lot of her going back into the past.
Yeah.
Reflection, stuff with her husband, stuff from her adolescence. Which from like a narrative point of view, I understand why it's there. I think those parts are important, maybe just a little too long.
I would. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Are we like getting into it? Do you want to
go
start?
ahead.
Okay, cool. I would tend to agree. I think that like the flashbacks to her husband definitely felt like a little bit much after a little while. I think we could have done with maybe just one of those, you know. But I will say that the flashbacks to her childhood, when she's kind of like going through this really stressful period with her parents and stuff, and then she finds this little piece of untouched, beautiful nature. I think that definitely adds something to her character and just the book itself, you know. But I agree, the husband stuff was definitely kind of dragged a little bit with you.
Yeah, which I think that I haven't read the other books yet, but I think there's going to be some stuff with the husband in the second book, or maybe it won't follow the biologist or him at all. There are a couple of things that I didn't quite understand, so I'm glad I got 3 more big brains to pick about. Near the end, after she's encountered the thing, she talks about how the starfish wasn't there. Like when she's looking at the whirlpool. Did her past actually happen? What was your guys' take on that? Because you know what I'm talking about?
Where she finds the destroyer of worlds and the starfish there. Yeah. Hold on, let me see if I can find that message.
Well, I'm trying to remember exact. So I read it maybe this a couple weeks ago. So she looked for it and it was not in the pool that night that she went out. Is that what we're talking about?
It actually, there was, when she got drunk, it was in the pool.
Okay.
But later on, after she encounters the crawler, she's kind of like waxing poetic about how none of that ever happened. Like she never had a life outside of this, which I think is more just poetic than anything else. Like the book does a lot of that.
So I know like one of the things that like kind of stood out to me when I was reading this, I actually, when I finished it, the first thing I did was look up if Jeff Vandermeer might have been in the military, and he wasn't. But like, I feel like thematically, like a lot of this book reads like it's about like PTSD, and like specifically like I found myself thinking of that, like, you know, okay, so like somebody goes to a war zone, comes back a different person. And I feel like thematically, like a lot of that book is about that, of like her really going into the zone and becoming a completely different person as she's going through that. I feel like looking at it through that lens, like my impression is that like the past did happen, but that it happened to what like kind of functionally feels like a different person at this point.
Yeah.
You know, and that even when like there's the flashbacks, like I actually did not find the stuff in the past to be too long personally, because like I kind of read it as like this person who is like so fundamentally changed that she questions the existence of the person she used to be, is like trying to like remember the details, and like that even if she can't really capture like the emotion of it, she can capture like the chronology of it, and like that's the next best thing. But yeah, with them, I think that probably is like more figurative, that it's not saying she's that none of that was real, but that it's disconnected from what she is now.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like that was definitely something that they harped on, or that was a really strong theme of the book, is that no one, if people came out of the zone at all, then they did not come out in the same way that they went in.
Mhm.
And they were not even themselves while they were there.
I would posit that they really never even came out of the zone. From the sound of it, like a lot of the time she describes like when she encounters like a boar that she can like see its humanity in its eyes, or she sees like a dolphin that reminds her of her husband and shit. I think that really what people get absorbed into the zone and they're changed and they just stay there forever. And what we're seeing come out of it is not human. I think it's just a different thing entirely.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's kind of what I gathered as well.
Yeah. And there's that part where she was talking about going through the ruined village, and that there were, there were the houses that had fallen in, and there were like vegetative growths that almost looked like they were person size. And I definitely took that to be an intimation that the people who had lived there had essentially, I don't know whether these were, they had died and their bodies had been, taken over by vines or whatever, or there was something that happened when the zone first started that they turned into something else. They kind of grew into the environment. But that definitely stuck out to me.
Would you like to hear a passage about that moment?
Yes,
Yeah.
let's hear
I'm
it.
glad I read some quotes. Ready? But in what had been kitchens or living rooms or bedrooms, I also saw a few peculiar eruptions of moss or lichen, rising 4 or 5 feet tall, misshapen, the vegetative matter forming an approximation of limbs and heads and torsos, as if there had been runoff from this material too heavy for gravity that had congregated at the foot of these objects. Or perhaps I imagined this effect. It all seemed like something that had happened a century ago, and what were left were just vague recollections of the event. End quote.
Yeah, that's good. There's a lot. It's a well-written book. Like a lot of the narration is really good. I am a little disappointed that there's a lot of unanswered questions still. I thought he was going to like show what was going on.
Mhm.
But I just have as many questions as I did from the beginning.
Yeah.
Some things got answered, but when things get answered, it raises more questions.
Yeah.
Which I guess is true of life. Like that's true of scientific discovery. But yeah, I assume that they're gonna get more into depth of what's going on in the other books.
Mhm.
So I'm excited to read the rest of the series. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you, like, I don't want to give any kind of information about the next couple books, but yeah,
Have you read the rest of them?
I've read all 3.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
The second one will give you a lot more concrete information about the Southern Reach and just the government itself. And the third one, you get right back into the wickedy stuff. It's
Okay.
pretty good. Yeah, it kind of goes up and down.
Okay.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I kind of like that effect though. Sometimes you want answers, but sometimes it's interesting to have things remain. The deeper you get into it, the more just unfolds that's unknown.
Yeah.
I didn't mind that bit of it, but yeah, I mean, it is sort of unsatisfying from a, what actually happened here perspective.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to start with like the negatives about it. And I am really just being nitpicky because I have a lot of good to say about it as well. Yeah. There's Okay, so there's a photo of this lighthouse keeper in the lighthouse, and when she finds it, it's circled.
Mhm.
So when she gets down to the bottom of the tower and finally encounters the crawler and just catches a glimpse of the lighthouse keeper or what's left of him in that form, she goes back and circles it again for
Mhm.
emphasis and puts it back, which means that that happened
Yeah.
the same way before. Someone went all the way down to the crawler and saw through the veil of what it was projecting on her mind or whoever came previously's mind, and then made the trek all the way back to the lighthouse and circled that
Mhm.
at
Yeah.
least once, which I think is interesting that this seems to be, that means that that person also didn't go all the way to the bottom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They also had the drive to climb all the steps and then
Mhm.
make their way back to the lighthouse.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the light down at the end of the tower.
Mhm.
Um, without external information for the other books, what do you guys make of that?
I'm trying to
So-
remember. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, like, I mean, like I said, reading entirely through the lens of like PTSD. Like my thing reading that was like just kind of, that knowledge that like she got so close and then just tapped out of just like, wasn't going to take in any more of, what was going on, wasn't going to, accept any more answers that would, force her to grapple more with this. Like I kind of read that as just like how people get shell shock. Like you see like so much violence that like you just like can't process it right anymore. And I felt like she was at that like just kind of like just top, just peak where she couldn't really engage fully with it at that point. So I guess I didn't even really think a whole lot about like, oh, what do I think is actually there? Because like I feel like the for me the point was that like she could no longer pursue whatever that information even was going to be. Um, I I definitely read this like going into it thinking like, oh, it's going to be like a Lovecraft story, and I think that maybe uh had me not necessarily expecting concrete answers, like excited to take in what was given, but not necessarily thinking they were going to be helpful
Mhm.
with anything on that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think that's just part of the very nature of this genre is just the idea of like cosmic horror, these incomprehensible
Mhm.
things that change our world and affect us and see us as so insignificant that we're just like these passerby, things to be
Yeah.
changed and affected and then cast away,
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
I think you did a good job with that.
Yeah, approaching it like John said from a Lovecraft perspective, like in that genre, that makes a lot more sense for there to be the continual unexplainable mystery. It's
Mhm.
not that it won't be explained, it's that it can't be explained. You can't wrap your head around it. Um, I wasn't approaching it from that way, and I think if I had, that probably would have made more sense at that point. I think this character, the biologist, this is me nitpicking somewhere, is I find her like she's not the worst main character by any means, but it's very much like I don't care about anything. I'm very cool. And she doesn't think herself is cool, but Jeff Vandermeer thinks she's so fucking cool. He thinks that he wrote like the coolest character ever.
This badass field biologist who don't care about nobody.
Yeah.
Well, see, so I'll admit I also explained that away when I was reading it because like with the idea of like you come out a different person, like I kind of wonder if like the real version of her in the past, because everything's narrated in past tense, so technically it's being told by the person who's already at the end of what happens in the story. And given how much she's been changed by everything, like my thought is like, is she even really capable of capturing the warmth that maybe she would have had as a character like before all this stuff had happened to her? And so that's kind of why I felt that like there's no like emotion to anything, and like just how detached she seemed, as that was reflecting where she is now more than anything else. And to the point that she might even like, I don't think she's an unreliable narrator in terms of the facts of what happened, but like I think that she might be extremely unreliable just from like the emotional weight of how things should have been kind of engaged with.
That's an excellent point, and it might have something to do with the spores also, like just making her calm. Yeah.
I think also, I mean, one thing we got to acknowledge too is hypnosis is so present in this book. She could have lost a lot of her personality going into Area X because they're talking about these intensive. It's almost like cult initiation behavior, working her down to nothing every day, reconditioning her every day. You do lose a lot of yourself in that.
That I'm glad you said that. At the point where she catches back up with the surveyor and they have their shootout. The surveyor says, "Tell me your name." And she says, "It wouldn't make a difference at this point." And what I thought of there was, I was like, does she not remember her name? Because that might have been lost and she just hadn't thought about it because there's so much going on, either through the hypnosis or through just this weird situation she's been put in. I wonder if they even remembered their names at that point. Because we never do learn any of the characters' names. I don't think is there a single name in the book?
The only mention they make of it is the psychologist has like a letter in her pocket with like some initials on it, but they never explain who that is.
Oh, yeah.
I know who it is, but I'm not going to tell you.
I think that was one of the most chilling parts of the book is the hypnosis, the suggestion stuff really fucked with me. I'm a big believer in the power of hypnosis and the malleableness of the mind. And I think they did that in a very realistic way. Like she had these cues, like these sort of like spells she could cast on them that would, for example, Annihilation. She had a kill spell for everybody. That part was crazy because that's the first thing when the psychologist is broken on the ground. That's the first thing she says to her when she sees her running up.
Would you like to hear the quote?
Yeah.
All right. Ready, here we go. Quote, "The psychologist did not seem to register my presence. I touched her gently on one broad shoulder, and then she screamed, lunged away, falling over as I recalled. Quote, 'Annihilation!' she shrieked at me, flailing in confusion. 'Annihilation! Annihilation!' The word seemed more meaningless the more she repeated it, like the cry of a bird with a broken wing. 'It's just me, the biologist,' I said in a calm voice, even though she had rattled me. 'Just you,' she said with a wheezing chuckle, as if I'd said something funny. 'Just you.'" End quote.
Yeah.
And then they explain it later.
Yeah.
So I think in that part too, she says, "I'm immune to your suggestion now." And she says, like, "Of course you were," because they mentioned earlier that in their sort of conditioning, she was very resistant to the hypnosis when she was trying to pry into her. So I wonder if like the spores just amplify aspects of yourself, or like if for example, like the anthropologist or the surveyor had inhaled the spores, whether they would have also become immune to suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, it could be personality. I kind of took it a little bit as, kind of this notion that inhaling the spores was making her more tied to the zone and more a part of the zone and and less human, and that the hypnosis and all the conditioning that she had, that was part of the outside world, and it was just like, yet one more casting off of the outside world, the world outside of the zone, was being immune to that kind of condition that she received, as almost as a defense or way to deal with the zone. But now that she's part of it,
I think it also just figures into her basic character too. Like throughout the book, all these flashbacks we see, she is purely an observer. She just watches life.
Oh, interesting.
And sits there. I think she's fundamentally different than the surveyor who seeks to control, and she's got the gun the whole time. And the psychologist is clearly a controlling figure.
Yeah.
I think she is fundamentally different, and the whatever influence she got from those spores kind of hitched onto that and changed her for it.
Got it. That's you make a really interesting point. Like her entire life, she's been kind of, yeah, observant, and like even when they're talking about like going to the bar, she's like kind of having a good time, people watching, rather than like engaging in conversation or anything.
So let me ask you this: do you think there's a parallel between? So if we're to understand Area X and like all the things she encounters as biological entities, like the crawler and the tunnel they talk about, or the tower they talk about as being this living thing. Do you think that she is basically a parallel to that? Like they're observing and unwittingly changing her and vice versa?
That's interesting.
I don't know.
The tower, I don't know. The tower almost seems more active than her. Well, I don't know. Maybe not the tower, but the crawler would be more active than her. Like he's a changer. It's altering things.
He also, I mean, the crawler is an observer on some level too. It basically probes into her mind and like rips into her psyche and understands her and then lets her go. Just like she would understand all these natural spaces she encounters.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything with her. It just wants to see what's going on. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I guess we should talk about the living words.
Oh yeah, and what the purpose.
Yeah.
That was definitely, still mysterious by the end of the book to me. Is what the whole purpose of that was.
Yeah, I think I think the biggest part where it talked about the words was actually in the lighthouse, where someone had written it down in their notes. We get bits and pieces of it as she progresses down into the tower, but I think there's actually a part in here.
Would you like me to read out the words and the
Oh, you got them?
surrounding? Yeah, I got
Yeah,
you.
fuck yeah.
All right. So, at about shoulder height, perhaps 5 feet high, clinging to the inner wall of the tower, I saw what I first took to be dimly sparkling green vines progressing down the darkness. Then, as I stared, the vines resolved further, and I saw that they were words in cursive, the letters raised about 6 inches off the wall. In as calm a voice as I could manage, aware of the importance of that moment, I read from the beginning aloud. Quote, "Where lies the strangling fruit that came from the hands of the sinner? I shall bring forth the seeds of the dead to share with the worms that... ... Then the darkness took it." End quote.
Yeah, it's very biblical. I thought it was going to have to do with the linguist that went missing. Like she was actually there ahead of everybody instead of not joining the mission or something like that. That's where I thought that was going, because it's just very poetic, you know. But I guess it's actually the lighthouse keeper that did it, which is, I guess, is also a very poetic profession. There's a part here. I began to perceive a terrible presence hovering in the background of these entries. I saw the crawler or some surrogate approaching in that space just beyond the thistle. She's reading journals right now that she found in the lighthouse, and a single focus of the journal keeper, a way of coping with that horror. An absence is not a presence, but still, with each new depiction of a thistle, a shiver worked deeper and deeper into my spine. So she's reading about this person that's just writing about a flower, basically. And she says she sees what's not being written here, which is like this person's hyper fixating on something to kind of detract their mind from what's taking place around them. When the latter part of the book dissolved into ruined ink and moist pulp, I was almost relieved to be rid of that unnerving repetition, for there had been a hypnotic, trance-like quality to the accounts. If there had been an endless number of pages, I feared that I would have stood there reading for an eternity until I fell to the floor and died of thirst or starvation. I began to wonder if the absence of references to the tower fit this theory as well, this writing around the edges of things. So we have in the tower a scrawl of text that just keeps going. for a very long time. And then comparatively in the lighthouse, we have this pile of journals that just goes on for eternity. There's so many of them. She wasn't able to get to them all, and some of them are lost forever. Like some of that information will never be recovered because the books were just in poor condition. I think there's definitely some like as above, so below kind of things going on between the lighthouse and the tower. They've got to be connected somehow. Even when she enters the lighthouse, she describes the steps as being similar to the tower. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Never mind. Sorry, keep going.
The lighthouse had drawn expedition members like the ships it had once sought to bring to safety through the narrows and reefs offshore. A lighthouse was a symbol, a reassurance of an old order, which I like that as well. It's still a lighthouse, even though there's no ships. It's a beacon, which even that's true even on the map they're given. It's sort of a central figure, even before they enter the place. It's something they're aware of, unlike the tower, which is completely absent. That's interesting as well. Like maybe this thing eats your memory of it, because no one seems to mention the lighthouse, even people that have, the tower, even people that have been there. I think except for her husband, who does mention it in his, but outside of that account, I think there's no other mentions of the tower besides the biologist report.
So I did have a thought about that, which is that I'm not certain that the tower existed with like at the time that the map was made. With basically my thought being that like the biology within Area X tends to mimic what it sees. And like we see that with like just the like organisms having like distinctly human features, and like the plants that have grown up that appear to have replaced like these humans and stuff. I feel like maybe the biology also observed the lighthouse and then recreated it. And they talk about the tower being this living organism, and like my thought is that like that is potentially just an organism that has been created as this attempt to approximate what they see with the lighthouse. So if they're going off any kind of map that was created just prior to the growth of Area X, that wouldn't have existed at that point. And so it would be a real question of like how quickly did that actually end up there, and then how does that sync up with people actually making it out of Area X and being able to communicate anything at all.
Yeah.
Got a relevant quote for you.
Yes.
Think about it. In talking about the tower, perhaps it is a creature living in perfect symbiosis with a host of other creatures. Perhaps it is merely a machine. But in either instance, if it has intelligence, that intelligence is far different from our own. It creates out of our ecosystem a new world, whose processes and aims are utterly alien, one that works through supreme acts of mirroring, and by remaining hidden in so many ways, all without surrendering the foundations of its otherness as it becomes what it encounters. End quote. I think you're right. I think that there's the idea of Area X is it feels like all the stimulus that she has, everything that she gets, like the tissue from the crawler and like the tissue from all like the ruined villages and stuff, it's all mimicry. This thing is taking nature and taking humanity that it assumes to be nature and remaking it in its own image in what it thinks is right.
Yeah. There's that thing howling in the woods that she eventually meets up with, and it chases her. And right before that, she sees heads that are kind of growing out of the ground. I had no idea what to make of any of that. Is interesting to say the least.
So my theory on that, just I'm putting both of the other books aside. Just what you can gather from this book. When a human dies in Area X, it's assumed they become a part of it. Like you see these animals that are basically the souls of humans or whatever. this thing that's howling in the reeds that they hear every night. What she sees is basically shed skins. It's like a shed mask of another person.
Mhm.
And she sees a bunch of them too. It's like this
Yeah.
thing is basically an amalgamation of people who have died in Area X, become part of it, and then slowly shed them over time.
Mhm.
It's
Jeez.
pure biology.
Oh, okay. So that thing fell off of it.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, it's shed
Oh,
it like
that-
kite.
That makes sense because she describes the moan as being very human and then also not at all.
Mhm.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that, but I guess you're right. That is kind of how it illustrates it too.
Yeah, trying to find.
While you're looking for that, I'm trying to find the description of the crawler
Oh, I got you.
where it's illustrated.
Here we go. Quote, as I adjusted to the light, the crawler kept changing at a lightning pace, as if to mock my ability to comprehend it. It was a figure within a series of refracted panes of glass. It was a series of layers in the shape of an archway. It was a great slug-like monster ringed by satellites of even odder creatures. It was a glistening star. My eyes kept glancing off it, as if an optic nerve was not enough. End quote.
It's beyond comprehension even looking at it. The brain just has no idea what to do with that, which seems like some kind of like either force field or like something like fourth dimensional where it's like it cannot exist in your perception. Yeah. I like the way he basically describes it as like 8 different things at once, basically. Because like if you were to see a fourth dimensional object, it would appear in motion, even if it was still. Just because you have so many moving pieces that are contradictory. It would give off the illusion that it was constantly shifting its form. Yeah. It's definitely something I recommend if you like cosmic horror.
Can I ask one more question
Yeah.
before we wrap it up here? What do you think happens when the crawler gets to the bottom of the tower? So I got a theory, but I want to hear you guys.
I think that it's gathering data. I don't know what the trail is about. I don't know what the words on the wall are about, but I think it's kind of gathering data to kind of send off, like to either to the tower itself or the tower. Like there's a light that shoots out of the tower that the biologist sees at one point, and so does her husband. So I think maybe it's like shooting that information out through light or something. Like here's what's going on this planet.
Sure.
Interesting.
What do you guys think before I say mine?
Wasn't there were a couple of discussions that there was evidence of older like layers of words. So I mean the if it's either the crawler or a predecessor has been writing on the tower for a long time repeatedly. I don't know whether he just goes back up or whether there's some sort of recycling that happens when he goes to the bottom.
It does give you the impression of a cycle, like this has happened before.
John?
Yeah, I don't think I've got a whole lot to add. Like, yeah, I mean, I do think that I'm not sure that there is an end point because I like you said with there being the layers of it. My assumption is that it's that continues as a process indefinitely, but no idea beyond that.
Yeah.
So my theory, I know that if you read the other books, this may be fundamentally wrong. I'm just going off what I read in this one. Essentially, what I thought happened, right? Since you see these layers of words, you see it like the crawler has clearly gone all the way down and all the way back up multiple times. I think essentially it's going down, leaving its message on a loop and coming back up. But the thing is, when it gets to the bottom and encounters that door, that pane of white light that you can't understand, that's when Area X changes. Because they talk about in several of these journals, they're like, they see the light grow stronger and stronger from the tower, and then they see their dead compatriots walking in procession towards it and shit. I think that when the crawler reaches the bottom, something happens that we just can't understand, and Area X either changes or expands, and all the people that have died in there become real just for a little bit again.
Interesting.
I mean, it also brings up the question: is like, is there an intelligence to this, or is it just pure biological drive? Is it an animal, a machine, or something greater?
That's funny you'd say that, because like biology is intelligent, just not consciously, you know.
Yeah.
So it is a difficult question, whether this is just a natural process, or if there's like intelligence behind what's going on. Yeah. I'm very interested. What's the second one called? Authority. Very interested to get to that. We're not going to do that next month. Next month we're doing Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. It's also sci-fi thriller. That one's about multiverse stuff. It's a longer read. This one was less than 200. The next one's 350 something. So it's a bit thicker, but I have heard really good things about it. It's supposed to be like one that really keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. Yeah.
Love it.
So I guess we should talk about the movie. I haven't seen it. Have you guys seen it?
No, I haven't. I specifically.
Yeah, I watched it. I've actually watched it more recently than I've read the book.
So I kind of already know the answer, but how does that hold up to the book?
I mean, I would say I like the book better. It is a very interesting movie, and like it's well acted, and is, you know, generally like, you know, thematically rich and has interesting ideas. So I mean, like I'd still recommend it as a film to most people. There are pretty significant departures from the book. I would say that largely like it's just an identical premise and cast of characters, but that like the actual events of the film are more like there's an attempt to match the feeling of what happened in the book more so than like the actual like specific events. And probably most notable as a departure is there is no tower in the movie.
Oh,
So there is the lighthouse that, you know, she's going towards, but like that does kind of really fundamentally shift like a lot of the like motivation and progression that happens in the film. The film is a little worse, I think, in terms of like being open-ended. If you can imagine, like it's there's not, like it's very like, and I don't know, maybe I'm making excuses for a lot, because I got my dad to watch it after I did. Like he really enjoyed it, except that he was like, it should not end where it ends. He's just like, it just seems and my argument for that is that the book is telling, from the way I've looked at it, is telling the story of like, this person who's gone through something horrible and is fundamentally changed is, going back and telling the story of, how she got to where she is now, how she got to become this new person. When you watch it as a movie, you're watching it in largely a present tense kind of, situation where you're following the person. And so my argument is that basically the movie ends the second the character we started with dies. Figuratively, speaking, like, basically there's no need for any future answers because we've already gotten to the point where we're done with the story of the person we got on board with. And so that's, mileage will vary on how frustrating or accepting, like, somebody can be with that. But yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. I would say the book is the stronger of the two works, but like certainly if you've read the book and enjoyed it at all, you get to kind of re-experience what that feels like, but also still be genuinely surprised because you actually don't know what's going to happen, even if you have read it.
So this is something I looked up too, because I saw the movie and then I read the book and I was like, what the fuck? Like, this is so much better. The director of the movie, he read the book a few years before he did the film, and then he wrote the film based on memory of the book.
Oh.
So he didn't actually use the book as a primary source. I think he was kind of going for this, like, oh man, nothing's real, everything's different. I'm just going to go on what I thought about,
Mm-hmm.
But I agree that the movie is totally worth watching, even just for the scene with the bear alone. I think that shit was awesome. Totally worth it. Yeah.
Evan, I have a question for you before we go. What is Annihilation about?
The book or the movie?
The book.
The book.
Yeah, explain that Annihilation to someone who's never read it.
Sure. Annihilation is the story of. Yeah, I'm gonna get right up my own ass here. Annihilation is a story of an area that humanity can't understand. It's an entity that has taken over our biology and an area of the world, and the government is aware of it. They hide this information from the public and from the people who go into it, but they're sending expeditional teams in to try to figure out what it is. What it is something so incomprehensible, so different than anything that humanity has ever experienced that the people going into it can't understand it. And everyone that goes into it is fundamentally changed. And those that come out of it are different than they were when they went in. And that's my Cliff Notes version.
That you did good job.
That's it,
Good
nailed
job. Yeah, fucking nailed it.
Okay, cool.
Alice, if this sounds interesting to you, go pick up Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and then join us next month for Dark Matter. Let's do some plugs real quick. What shows you got coming up?
Oh, so we got one at Gunk House on August 9th with a bunch of bands. I'll be I think there's like 9 or 10. So that'll be fun. August 9th, Gunk House.
Nice. And then John, you said next show coming up is
Yeah, we got November 4th at the Cobra. Bands to be announced on that, but definitely Resistance House Band will be on it.
hell yeah.
Cool.
Thank you everyone so much for being here. I really, really, really appreciate you guys. This means a lot to me that y'all made it.
Thank you,
I don't
Alex.
know.
Had a great
Happy to
time.
do it.
Cool. Well, we will see you next week, Alice. Bye.